we've had 2 episodes of The Bad Batch in about the span of, well, today. The first one, oddly enough, seems to be we now know what is actually in the vault on Tantus, and why the fact they are looking into sort of like midichlorians M-count and M-count transfers, and why Omega was so important. Basically, this episode gives us the idea that, oddly enough, various members of the Bad Batch itself, specifically Omega, is very important because of actually a child seems to have the ability to actually absorb M-count and actually be compatible. And at the same time, Force sensitivity, once upon a time, might mean for a fact you might get kidnapped by a Sith, or perhaps you'll get a knock on the door from a couple of Jedi asking about what other things you've done, and then your child will be taken off to the Jedi Temple for training further down the line. Now life has become a lot harder, with the Empire quite clearly offering high-level bounties for a Force-sensitive child. That in itself was an interesting idea. And of course, oddly enough, it was at the marketplace we're actually wondering the fact that child actually had it. So the fact that child's gift. So basically, I think that child was Force sensitive. And then, of course, who should be the one collecting this bounty? Class 1 bounty hunter? Well, it's the man himself. Everyone's favourite flanking boot, cowboy, space westerner, Duro Cad Bane. It sounds like he's got a form of throat cancer. That might be his breathing apparatus. Also, I think what was particularly interesting about this episode in particular was, oddly enough, on Tantus itself. We now know what's in the vault. Basically, we've got 3 Force-sensitive children, or children who most likely could be Force-sensitive, or just have a high metachlorine count. We can't really say. But what is interesting here is the fact that Emery, the scientist who's been sort of working under Dr. Hemlock, as a senior scientist, has basically told Hemlock the fact that ever since Nala Singh, the Kaminoan scientist, or Nala Singh, I suppose, was basically put into a detention cell and just left there. Their research has stalled, but she can do it, and she can do it quickly, because this research is of utmost importance to the Empire, but ever since they've put her in confinement, the research project has stalled. So what she's told Hemlock is like, I can continue the work, blah, 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 blah. Hemlock's gone, okay, and brings her up to speed and takes her into the vault. In there, we meet 3 children, I think 2 girls and a boy, and throughout the course of the episode, we learn a little bit about Emery. It seems a funny feeling that she herself may not have actually had much of a childhood, and somehow for a fact she seems to be the more compassionate batch of the clone. I call them that because they're largely all the same. As for who they're clones of, I can't really say. Part of the fact they might have been even grown from Tech DNA, but that's the funny thing about Tech, was the fact of how clever he was. But getting off topic here. This episode, and what I really liked about the whole thing, the fact, well, one, Emily is not sure what to think, and, she bonds with, I think, one of the girls in there. Basically, you've got 3 different distinct personality attempts. You've got, if I don't do anything, I won't get hurt. You've got, I've got to get out of. The boy's like, I've got to get out of here. And then you've got a girl who just doesn't really know anything and just does sort of stuff. And basically is the most outgoing. And Emery bonds with her. This is particularly unique in the fact that what Cad Bane has done is, of course, he's kidnapped the Force-sensitive toddler. And at the same time, Cad Bane plans to make a drop-off. Emery witnesses some very dark, very sinister things going on in the lab itself. Like, for example, the boy just tries to make his escape, and at the same time, the clone commandos and the people observing them sound the alarm. He tries to make escape using Emery's data pad, because that basically serves a bit like a key, but he can't get the door open. 3 clone commandos storm in, guns drawn, they stun him, and then they take him back into his cell and just confine him in it. The other thing I found particularly interesting, I think, was also the fact how sinister the maintenance droid, or more specifically, the droid that takes the blood sample. But anyway, Emery decides to go and collect this newest arrival to the facility, and it turns out for a fact that she along goes with the commandos. Cad Bane takes payment, and at the same time, Emery confirms the metachlorine count, and then the child is then cut off at the lab at Tantus, and Emery begins wondering about what has happened to her during the time period. She's going over Nala Singh's work, and she often wonders just what's been going on. For example, you've got Echo's lunchbox in the lab itself. Because basically Omega is highly intelligent, so Hammett wasn't going to put such fine talents to waste, and she could be a very useful assistant in ensuring the fact that Nala Singh did her work. At the same time, Emery is wondering about her own moral compunctions, about what Hemlock's doing, about the commandos. I think just about everything she's been doing lately, and she may be developing a little bit of a moral code. And I think it's an interesting exploration of the ethics of science, especially when it comes to young subjects, children. And Emery, oddly enough, decides to give, I think, the girl who's become my particular favourite, give her a little surprise. Namely, oddly enough, it's the stuffed straw toy that Omega made in the basically during a stay there out of basically bits of straw from Badger's cave. And Emery decides to give it to that same girl by leaving it outside the door one day after she wakes up. In our next episode, meanwhile, the clone Black Ops sniper has been trying to figure out how to get to Pabu, the planet where the Bad Batch have basically set up home for. And oddly enough, things don't seem to go well. He tracks down, oddly enough, the Bad Batch's contact. But first things first, he goes off to Sid's place, basically, and after some interrogating, gets information. That then puts them onto the realm of the Bad Batch's newest friend and surrogate aunt to Omega. She, of course, wonders what's been going on as the sniper or Black Ops clone figures out a way to board the ship when she's refueling, but of course, like anyone involved in the criminal/smuggling trade, she's got a few precautions on her ship. Namely that she has a anti-hacking piece of technology, which when activated, it will basically sound an alarm. That sets the alarm off. The maintenance droid thinks, in fact, it's something to do with the fuel, but the clone sniper switches it off, tracks encrypts navigational data, and follows her, or tracks her down to Pabu. This in turn leads him to locate Omega and lead the Imperial forces to the town. And this is where the episode, I think, once again gets really dark. Not as dark as the first episode, but definitely very dark. As a bunch of clone commandos and the sniper basically just begin destroying the town and rounding up the citizens and assaulting them just to round up Omega. And now the Stormtroopers blasters, or TK-Troopers blasters, have switched from the blue bolts of their predecessors' guns to the red bolts that we now know the Empire to use later down the line. But also at the same time, the sniper pretty much just decides, after telling them where to find Omega, destroys the town. And also, the Marauder is knocked out, or basically reduced to a burning wreck, by the destruction of the same clone sniper. And this further continues a trend going throughout the rest of the episode. The town is systematically burned, and the citizens are rounded up, as everything they ever had has been destroyed. But before this sets off, Hunter, the Bad Batch, and Omega decide to leave the town, leaving what basically was effectively home for. And this then leads to a bad mission gone awry. I don't know why the fuck they didn't go back to Parvo doing their first one, because the Empire didn't really know about Parvo. And at the same time, why go back to Sid's? I mean, Parvo would make a lot more sense with the first time that Wrecker got wounded, as he could rest up in peace and heal, while at the same time, they could all just de-stress. But then, of course, that would be for a fact of there I go about ranting about the plot. But I think what really makes this episode quite interesting was the fact that Omega realizes for a fact that this is part of their mission. You know, they need to contact Echo and get Rex and his guys on the case. But oddly enough, they can figure out a way to track her down. They try using her comms, but Crosses says the fact they'll search her. And they try firing, says the fact want to fire a tracking beacon onto the ship. Too many random variables. I get the funny feeling that the Bad Batch will find their way to Tantis, but I'm not sure what fate will wait Omega. I think Hamill's just going to lock her in a cell or just find her there. Or maybe just carve her up, just to amuse himself. And he might even know that Emery is now developing a moral and sense of ethics. Yeah, these episodes have been very interesting. Very, very, very good. The Bad Batch is clearly building up to the end of the episode. I mean, this was the double bill, so I'm not sure when they did the first one, that could have just been a standalone, but I get the funny feeling what they're setting up to is for a fact that Emery might be doing an about-face, and this could lead to further questions in terms of Imperial ethics. Maybe for a fact, this is how the Rebel Alliance was actually born. Namely, the actions of some clones, and for a fact of Rex and the others, and as stories of their active bravery and heroism spread throughout the rest of the Empire. This in turn, plus the negotiations and careful maneuvering done by people like Mon Mothma, Chuchi, and various other members of the Confederacy Senate, lead to the birth of the Rebel Alliance. But it's still early days. Yet this and the acts of rebellions keep on going. I get the funny feeling basically this is how the Empire starts reaching the height of its power, but also where it basically starts hammering the nails into its own coffin. I really have enjoyed most of these episodes already, and it's been getting better and better each week. But these two are quite definitely some of the darkest ones yet. Probably some of the darkest moments in all of Star Wars. And that's talking about a lot of stuff. Bearing in mind that the Clone Wars TV show was really meant to be a kid's show. But enough me rambling. Yeah, both episodes I think were very good in their own way. It gives us an interesting explanation of a side character who basically might start developing a moral code and hesitation, and may play a role later on towards the final arc of the story. And oddly enough, beginnings of what might be the rebellion could be set up as word of the Bad Batch, Echo, and Rex spread far and wide. The remains of their network quite possibly laying the groundwork for what would eventually become either the Partisan Alliance, with guys like Sol Guerrera, or perhaps even the Rebel Alliance itself, with Senator Tucci and Bail Organa using the remains of that network to start up a rebellion, and provided with funding and other means. Because we know for a fact that Tucci and Bail Organa have been using Rex and his developing network for their own ends, and the means to discuss the situation going on in the Empire at the minute and their concerns. So it stands to reason that others may have also known it, and Rex has been an Echo over making contacts with people they've known throughout the Clone War, who've basically realised what's been going on. And it's through that network that the rebellion is formed in its early days, and it's how, oddly enough, Mon Mothma, everyone's favourite, I would say, ruffian slash facilitator, the man who basically created the emphasis that will lead to the rise of the Rebel Alliance and ultimately lead the Empire pretty much to sign its own death warrant. And with that, I've been the Universal Challenger. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheerio!